The suspension of Mrs. Joyce Oduah as the General Secretary of the Nigerian Bar Association has been a topic of conversation as the Nigerian Bar Association holds its annual General Conference. A suspension was ratified late Sunday evening at the NEC meeting, which is part of the activities of the NBA Conference, holding at the Eko Atlantic City, Lagos. However, at the resumed hearing in the matter, Justice Ahmed Ramat Mohammed set aside the NEC ratification and reinstated Oduah to office. The ratification of Oduah's suspension was voided and set aside by the court on the ground that the action was an affront to the rule of law and a violation of the court's proceedings in the matter. Joining us on this show this morning, as we discuss this latest ruling by the Federal High Court in Abuja, is Ayo Ogunleye, Abuja-based human rights lawyer and a member of Joyce Oduah's legal team. Welcome to the morning show.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, thank you for coming. Yesterday we had Olumide Akpata, the NBA president, on this program. And one of the questions raised in the course of our conversation with him was this issue of the suspension of the General Secretary of the NBA on August 15 by the National Executive Council, and whether indeed NEC didn't act ultra-various, but well, he had his own defense. And just later, yesterday, after the program, we now had this ruling by Justice Mohammed. It looks like what this 62nd Annual General Conference of the NBA may be remembered for is the politics of suspension, intervention of the courts, the NBA itself being accused of violation of the rule of law, an institution that is committed, according to his own rules and logo and motto, to defense of the rule of law. What do you make of all of this and the implications for the tenure, the legacy of Olumide Akpata as NBA president?
Thank you, Doctor. See, I must say immediately that we are in a constitutional democracy where the rule of law and the entrenchment of it must be encouraged by all persons and citizens of our nation. Now, parties have a right to be aggrieved and, upon their disagreement, submit their grievances to the court for adjudication, which is exactly what Ms. Joyce Oduah has done in this instance. What is, however, troubling is that during the pendency of that litigation, steps are being taken by parties to the litigation who have submitted themselves to the jurisdiction of the court, particularly the NBA president, Mr. Olumide Akpata, and the Nigerian Bar Association itself. And as was rightly decided yesterday by the Honorable Court, that decision, which was taken by the NEC of the NBA on Sunday, the 21st August 2022, was an infringement on the powers of the court. And the court rightly set it aside. Let me take you through history. In 1986, the same situation as what is playing out in this case played out between the military governor of Lagos State and Ojukwu. And that matter had the opportunity of being pronounced upon by the Supreme Court. As you will remember, sir, the government was dissatisfied with the occupation, continued occupation of Chief Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu of the property described as number 29 Queen's Drive, Ikoyi.
The last college.
Yes, exactly. And then the matter was before the court. And while it was before the court, the government went ahead and evicted him from occupying the property. The Supreme Court pronounced on it and said that is the rule of force, which is contrary to the rule of law. And in a constitutional democracy, all persons, no matter how powerful, must do all they can to ensure that the rule of law is entrenched. In 1990, in Kwara State, there was a dispute over property between the registered trustee of the Apostolic Church and a woman called Olowoleni Emanuela. That matter also got to the Supreme Court. It was pronounced upon by the Supreme Court on 15th October 1990. And the Supreme Court said the action of the church, even being a church, that infringed on the proceedings of court by going ahead to erect a wall on a property which was subject of litigation during the pendency of litigation, amounted to a gross breach, a gross violation of the jurisdiction of the court, which must be condemned immediately. The said wall was torn down. As you know, sir, in 2007, in Anambra State, the governor of Anambra State, Mr. Peter Obi, was of the view that his tenure as governor had not lapsed, and INEC was of the view that the tenure had concluded and that there should be an election. This issue resulted in litigation in 2007. And as you see from the way I'm tracing the history, the courts have been consistent from the military era even to this nascent democracy. INEC went ahead and conducted that election despite pendency of proceeding in court. The Supreme Court set it aside. Now in 2022, the worst case of this violation occurred on Sunday by no less a body than the Nigerian Bar Association, being led by Mr. Olumide Akpata. And we are happy that this is happening now. Why? Because the NBA is one of the most respected voices in terms of the defense of the rule of law, cautioning the nation to ensure that things are done appropriately, respected both locally and internationally. And so, when the Olumide Akpata-led administration decided to resort to self-help and take a decision to ratify a suspension, which was subject of litigation, the judiciary came to its own defense. And that decision came under the gavel yesterday, and it was set aside.
You are sounding triumphant.
Indeed, it is triumph for the rule of law. It is triumph for democracy. It is triumph for constituted authority. You see, sir, all persons in a democratic nation like ours in Nigeria, a nation that has hope and is gravitating daily towards glorious returnings, it must be the case that we must protect our courts.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Ayo, we'll come back to the details. Let Emmanuel finish.
Okay, well, triumphalism is allowed when lawyers win their cases in court.
Yeah.
Well, but to be fair to Olumide Akpata, because the NEC only ratified an earlier suspension. And when that suspension was done, because the issues involved Olumide Akpata himself, you recall that he recused himself, and 9 members of the body took that decision. So to be hammering on Olumide Akpata as if he was a sole administrator, I don't think it's also fair. Because 9 members, all 9 members, of course excluding Olumide Akpata who recused himself and Joyce Oduah who was an issue, 9 members took the decision to suspend her after going through a litany of allegations or infractions against her. So I don't think it would be fair to just hammer on Olumide Akpata, because it was a party to the issue that led to the initial suspension, which was ratified by the NEC. So it was not Olumide Akpata as a person, but 9 other members of that executive committee took that decision. As to whether they were trying to, of course, the court had ruled, and to that extent, we say the court has the final say on that matter. So I just felt I should just bring that in.
You see, sir, there is a saying of my father, very common, that a man is not adjudged in sin because his leg or his hand or his stomach is not functioning properly, but his head is not functioning properly. I have continued to repeat that the NBA has led by Mr. Olumide Akpata. And let me take you through the proper, correct facts of the situation. He presided over the NEC meeting that held on Sunday, the 21st of August 2022, which decision the court has now found to be an affront to his jurisdiction. And what is more interesting is that he was in court in person on the 18th, submitting personally to jurisdiction. Now, you allude to the fact that it was 9 members. What happened was that they called what they referred to as an emergency meeting, where they took an emergency decision. And you will also recall that the allegations
which
that
is not alien to the rules of NBA.
Interesting. The allegation that you said they went through rigorously were made by the same 9 who sat on the same allegations and pronounced suspension on the same person. And our good brother watched his hand up the proceeding, just like Pontius Pilate, by recusing himself, handing the General Secretary over to those who are crying, crucify her, crucify her, crucify her. The question is this: Nemo Judas in Cassasua is the principle.
Judge in his own cause.
Can it be said in this case that the persons who pass the suspension, and interestingly, I must draw your attention to this fact, the suspension in the language of their own resolution is suspension pending the pre-conference NEC which ratified the suspension, and like I said, presided over by Mr. Akpata. Now, that same resolution has now been set aside by court. The language of the resolution is that you are suspended pending the meeting of NEC, pending a decision of NEC, and the court has set aside the decision of NEC. It means that as of today, there is no suspension. Mrs. Joyce Oduah, the General Secretary of the NBA, is no longer on suspension because of the simple doctrine as laid down by Lord Denny. You cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stand. This is something, nothing. It's not going to stand. So that is just a clarification there.
Okay, quickly. Yesterday I quoted Joyce Oduah, I quoted Abdul Rashid. You were holding brief for Abdul Rashid SAN in court yesterday. Yes, okay, now, does this decision by the Federal High Court, does it invalidate this 62nd Annual General Conference? Because in the NBA Constitution, is it not the responsibility of the legitimate General Secretary, to call the Annual General Conference? Because Joyce Oduah having been suspended, an acting General Secretary was put in her place. So what are the implications? Because as Ebolu Adegborough, SAN, has argued in an opinion on this matter, I think this morning, it's out there, he was saying that, look, this has put the shine of this Annual General Conference, and it has accentuated, I'm paraphrasing him now, the crisis between young members of the bar and the elders of the bar, knowing that that was part of the original politics in the NBA leading to the emergence of Olumide Akpata. What do you think?
You see, firstly, I must say this. We have one NBA, and whatever happens in terms of disagreement is a way of drawing our attention to better ways of becoming a better NBA. The primary purpose of the Nigerian Bar Association is promoting the rule of law. And all that is playing out in this time is merely accentuating the efficacy of the rule of law. For there to be a dispute, there will be two parties. And so, what it will turn out to be eventually is that, one, Nigerians are aware that we have a body of lawyers capable of disagreeing, capable of submitting to court jurisdiction, capable of not submitting to self-help, and when that mistake was made, matured enough to approach the court, having the court set it aside and obeying the court's decision. What we now look forward to is the further translation of that same principle and ethos of promoting the rule of law by now allowing the whole world to see them correcting their own wrong. That's my own expectation.
No, you have not asked my specific question.
Yes, sir.
I was asking you, is this conference, is it voidable?
Now,
Since it was not convened by the secretary,
now,
who is statutorily empowered to do so.
you see, these are part of the issues which are already been submitted to court for adjudication. And I will speak about them very circumspectively. Now, as you and I know, the law is very clear. When the law makes specific provision on the way and manner in which a thing should be done, any deviation from it will render whatever is done null. The conference is still ongoing. Our annual general meeting is on Thursday. And so, there is still room. That is my way of answering your question directly. There is still room to set right the wrong which has been done, so that what appears wrong now will now not become eternally wrong and then define the legacy of this administration.
Of the Akpata administration.
Of the Akpata administration, yes, sir. And we must also commend, the NBA for putting together a very beautiful conference. Like I told you, sir, you see, in every egalitarian society, it must be encouraged always that parties be open to submit themselves to court for resolution of their disputes. It must be encouraged, and we must all, the press is the fourth estate of the realm, must do all it can every time to encourage citizens of our nation to believe in the court, respect the proceedings of the court, and ensure that it is protected. By court order now, the suspension which was hitherto done and made subject to ratification by NEC, that ratification now having been set aside, there is no suspension anymore.
Okay, I mean, you've made that point very clear.
Yes,
but where does this leave all this division within the bar? Clearly, there's division within the bar. One of the points raised by Ebunlu Adegboru SAN in his review of the crisis is that, look, it looks like the NBA, by not organizing itself properly, is playing itself into the hands of the bench, to sanction it and deal with it on the basis of its own nominations. But where does this leave Mike Yahweh SAN, the incoming next president of the NBA? It looks like he will have some, fence mending to do.
Well, very correct. Every new administration has responsibility to build upon the gains or the wrong of the previous administration. I do not subscribe to the opinion that there is doom yet for the NBA. No, there is a disagreement. It has been submitted to call for adjudication. The bar has in it the benefit of men who are distinguished leaders in our society. I am quite confident that these men have the wherewithal to resolve an issue of this nature without it skyrocketing into something that will affect the integrity of the bar. The message is clear. We must respect the rule of law. And if there be any person no matter how highly placed, whether it be president of the bar or whatever authority or position, when they cross that line, which is the demarcation between rule of law and rule of force, the court is always very quick to bring them back. You can see the consistency from 1986 even up to yesterday in 2022.
The supremacy of the rule of law is something lawyers should hold very high, but the courts have adjudicated and all lawyers involved in this matter will fall in place. But it's like there are further issues to be for the court to adjudicate on from what you have just said.
You see,
the status of the conference having not been called by the secretary, who is statutorily mandated to do so by your own rules and regulations. So there are further issues to be adjudicated upon in the court. And what are these issues, clearly?
Well, that is correct. First things first is this. You see, the essence of correct human engagement is the protection of the legacy of the name. And when an action is taken by a group of people which amounts to the soiling of name, any man or woman should be encouraged to do whatever it takes legitimately to protect their name. The conference that you referred to and the AGM of the NBA, like I told you, there is still time for the needful to be done. Particularly the matter even before the court.
Anyway, this has been very interesting.
Thank
but
you.
Just before you go,
Yeah.
I hope you were not one of those lawyers fighting over people not giving them their badges, they not getting their registration materials, and refreshment not being provided. I thought I saw someone that looked like you. Have you seen that video?
I can tell you for free that I am not aware of lawyers fighting for conference materials.
You've not seen the video?
And that lawyers will not.
Okay.
The constituency which I represent will not fight for conference.
I will take your number after the program and I will send you a copy of the video.
Thank you,
Anyway,
Dr.
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ayo Ogunleye.